So let's take another look at some of the factors affecting constraints on cities, specifically taking a look at the work of Paul Peterson, whose most famous book was called City Limits, in which he basically talked about the role of city governments in the American federal process. And he said the real problem for cities, as we've been discussing, is that they find themselves at the bottom of the food chain of the American federal system. So other people have enormous power over them and much more power in the policymaking system. So they can't declare war, can't regulate immigration, from one state to the next. They can't have tariffs or control imports. The city of Philadelphia can't stop Jersey tomatoes from coming in. All kinds of things that might affect their economy. And because of where they find themselves in the federalism food chain, that constrains their ability to be able to deal with the problems associated with their cities. And the biggest problem that cities face is competition from other cities for economic development. And as a consequence, in order to be able to create a good business environment to provide jobs, to get a tax base, they have to keep taxes low, which means that they can provide less services, particularly to those in need. So much of what we find from Peterson's work is that the idea of redistribution of income doesn't work at the local level because localities are constantly competing with other localities for jobs and for new residents who don't like to have high taxes. Now, if we take a look at this, what Peterson's genius was he came up with basically three types of public policies that were advantageous and cities dealt with at different points in time. So developmental policies are those that basically enhance the economic position of the city. So, for example, things that are common large developmental projects might be a new convention center, a new sports stadium, development of new retail space that would attract businesses and consumers to come to your specific city and spend money. Those are good because they help economic development and make the city more attractive to people, either to live there or to visit there. Redistributive programs, on the other hand, are those programs that would take money from one group in society, typically those who are more wealthy, and redistribute it to the people that are poor within society, many of which are concentrated in urban areas. Now, the problem for Peterson is, in studying redevelopmental policies or redistributive policies, he finds that cities are very loath to be able to undertake these because, A, they're worried about attracting more poor people because of the level of benefits that they would have, and B, they're worried about the disincentive for people to move to their cities because of the amount of poor people that would be there, in addition to the fact that they would have to pay higher taxes to be able to redistribute income. And because of that, there would be less wealthy people that would want to live in the cities. And finally, allocational policies are something that Peterson calls a somewhat neutral in between, don't have as much economic effect on a city, things like police, garbage collections, things like that. In later works, he actually dropped that allocational stuff because what we find is that providing basic services for the city is actually developmental. People want to have those basic safety, cleanliness, and so forth provided, or they're not willing to move to a new city or it's to stay there over the long term. So for Peterson, in describing this then, what he basically said was, since cities are caught in this trap where they're constantly competing with each other, we really ought to have the federal government take over all redistributive programs because they could do it on a national level, and economic development will be done at the local level or the state level because that's where it's been done successfully in the past. So basically, when Peterson describes the interests of a local government, this is what he says: the interests of local government require that it emphasize the economic productivity of the community for which it's responsible. Because they're open systems, local governments are particularly sensitive to external changes. To maintain their local economic health, they must maintain a local efficiency that leaves little scope for egalitarian concerns. These limits on local government require that local governments concentrate on developmental as against redistributive objectives. And what's interesting, I've done some research in collaboration with some people at Temple University and some wider undergraduate students, and even when mayors talk about redistributional policies, they talk about them as being developmental. Let's help develop our workforce so that we're more competitive. The idea of redistributing income is just kind of like the third rail of politics for mayors. And what we've seen is that they generally try to avoid it. Economic development is the focus, which means basically you're focusing on helping businesses and trying to attract wealthier people to your city. And for Peterson, that comes at the expense of the poor. And those issues then should be done by the federal government, according to him.